welcome back to the channel. On today's episode, we are gonna go ahead and get this thing all figured out once and for all and get this hybrid system, well, the 48 volt system, and the engine on this thing and alternator and everything checked out so we can figure out why this thing isn't charging. On top of that, guys, I've already went ahead and ordered all the parts, and we actually got these parts really quickly from BMW, all original, and they're already in. So if we can get this frame pulled out and get this system all figured out, we can go ahead and start taking everything all apart and reassembling it because we got all of our parts already in. So back over here, we literally have every part you can think of. I mean, we got all of our curtain airbags right here in this box. We've got trays for the upper radiator support, left and right. We got the bar that goes around, the big bumper that's literally right over there. I mean, all this was about $8,000 worth of parts. We found our headlights used with modules intact, and there is no damage. All parts are all OEM from BMW, and no damage with the BMW LED adaptive light systems. Those headlights from the dealerships were around $2,500 without 1, 2, 3 modules, and then you have to reassemble everything and then obviously code it, which we still have to code these, but we got these headlights for $1,000 a piece, all completed with perfect A-grade condition, guys. And we got all of our parts. Literally, we got all the little stuff. We got all of our hardware. We got the driver's side airbag. This is the airbag, as you guys can see back here. And all this from BMW, all OEM, ready to go. So we can go ahead and get this thing all reassembled. But we got to figure out why this thing is not charging up. And it is still a mystery because I've contacted multiple people trying to figure this out, and we can't figure it out whatsoever. I've literally contacted guys in Lithuania, Slovakia, Ukraine, because Ukraine, believe it or not, actually makes the wiring harnesses for a lot of these BMWs and stuff. And with European cars being made in Europe, a lot of the European people actually are way far more advanced than we are right now, because this is just coming in with this technology. I believe they started doing the hybrid system in 21, but a lot of the guys in Europe countries, they're the ones that probably assembled this, and they're the ones that actually are kind of ahead and know about how the system works. But out of everyone we've asked, we literally called the dealership, spoke to the service writer, even spoke to a technician at our local BMW, and they did not know. And they just told us to bring it in for diagnostics, $160, $170 an hour, and they're probably gonna tell me it's a distribution box, which I've already figured out. It's something to do with that box, but you know, what good does it do? Because that part's unavailable. You can't find that part anywhere. We figured out what it was, and only one guy all the way from Lithuania that I messaged one day, and I was at night, 11:30 at night, I was looking around for a pyro fuse, which you still can't get one of those from the dealer because the dealership does not just sell the little pyro fuse, they sell the whole distribution box, and you can't get one because the part's unavailable. So we found the pyro fuse, and we were messaging the seller, and he told us that on the new PSS3 pyro fuse, I'll put a picture up there, you guys will have a top connector. The top connector breaks down the feedback for that battery for the 48 volt system and feeds it back up front, letting the alternator turn on. So in theory, to test that out until the part's available, we don't know any of the ETA yet, but all we gotta do is loop the system, and that should engage our alternator. Hopefully this works, fingers crossed. Let's figure this out. So this is the new style PSS3 pyro fuse that has came out with all these new vehicles. Mercedes, BMW, all these have a top fuse link as well. And the purple part is for your SRS module. That disconnects the starter. That's why we had to bypass that to just get the vehicle started. That top connector is also for the alternator and as well as the 48 volt system. In theory, if we were to loop the system with the wiring harness before it connects into that sensor and go ahead and just splice them together, we should have a voltage reading go back up and the alternator engage until this part becomes available. That's how we'll run it, so we can get this thing all charged up and repaired, and when that part becomes available, we'll just have to swap it out. Yo, take a look at this. Remember how we're having the battery fault, and while the car was running, it was only at 12 and going down in voltage? I figured out the new technology on this system. It has to do with this back battery. There's a wire that's down here that goes to the side. There it is with flash. You can see the wire. There's one that goes for airbags, and then the other one is a third-party fuse that detects for the hybrid battery system. All you do is you loop it. I took apart the pyro fuse and I figured out how the system works. All it has to be is loop. Inside, now we have no more hybrid system fault at all. Like 48 volt system, all the faults gone, no more code just by bypassing wire. Only code I have right now is obviously from steering wheel airbag, curtain airbags, and knee, but I have all the parts, almost 8 grand worth of parts, all from BMW back here. And alternator is good, 14.4 volts while car is running. Alrighty, so we figured out our system. Now we're gonna get this thing all loaded up, and thank goodness everything on this thing works. We already have lights, obviously, for the airbags, but that's because we have parts behind us that we gotta replace them with. And so for now, before we can start work on this front end, we actually got to take this thing over to the frame shops to get it pulled out. Let's get this thing loaded on the trailer and head straight over to our buddy's shop and get this thing all pulled out and squared away. Alrighty guys, so I totally spaced out. Right as I was supposed to pull out of here, I quickly took this apart because I realized that we actually need to replace our seatbelt. So our seatbelt was locked up on the driver's side, and I got to get this thing shipped out. That way they come back into us. So I took most of the panels off. They're all on clips, to be honest. It's really simple. Remove the weather stripping, pull this off. We got 2 bolts here, a couple connectors for the airbag system. And then you can see there's also another crash sensor right over there as well. So let's go ahead, pull the seatbelt out, and then get this thing over to the shop. To our buddy's shop, and he's got 1 car on the frame machine right now, so he said just drop it off. He'll get it actually back to us by this afternoon around 2-3 o'clock, possibly in the evening, but he said it is not that big of a damage. All it is the frame rail had just moved probably about 1 inch the most over to the right side, and it's just a tip, so he's gonna pull it back off. We also dropped off the reinforcement bar for him as well, and also the bottom bar for the bracket retainer for the bumper, and that way we can make sure everything's all squared away. He's gonna go ahead and actually install that for us too. When we get this thing back, we are all ready for our first assembly, putting this thing all back together, and hopefully everything lines up, and then we're gonna get ready to get this thing all prepped and painted. But for now guys, I'm gonna go run all my other errands, and then I'm gonna go ahead and pick this thing up, and I'll grab the camera and bring you guys along for the ride. Has passed the frame machine. It is square, it is straight. We're actually driving there right now, and I'm gonna go down there and pick this thing up. He should have the rebar actually on there. It is 5:30, and just like he said, it's gonna be ready by the end of the day. It sure is, and I'm super excited because now this means that we can actually go ahead and pick this thing up, bring it back to the house, get this thing all put together, test fit, mock fitted, and get this thing 1 step closer to being in the booth, getting some paint on it. So let's go ahead, get this thing, pick it up, and I'll show you guys once I get there. Alrighty guys, so we are driving this thing back to the trailer. I guess you could say this is our first test drive. Obviously it's not a test drive whatsoever, but yeah, Got it back up on the trailer, and we'll see what happens. He couldn't get the rebar on there, but that was because they forgot that the rebar was in the trunk. So we'll go ahead, put this together, and see what happens. Hopefully it lines up. He said if it doesn't, bring it back in. We'll give it a slight pull, but it's better to always go ahead and pull it very slowly, and then make sure everything fits versus over pulling it and then being like, oh shoot. Alrighty guys, so we got the rebar on here, and he actually did not want to put the rebar on there because on the bottom side over here, you can see how this is straight. On the other side over here, if you look really closely to it, you can see how it bent over our subframe actually. So we put the rebar on there just for now, and everything on it's good. So that means the frame's good. That's why the gaps up here are closed in now, and it's all adjustable from now, and same with that side. But we're gonna have to go ahead and replace that subframe, so I'm gonna order that in. It's about $1,000 subframe. It's gonna come in here in the next couple days. Alrighty guys, so we are back from the frame shop, and our buddy went ahead, helped us put this in. All the frame rails are straight, our hood gaps are good, but there is one big problem that we have going on. Is if you looked over here, especially on day one, you would see that there was a crack right there on the bottom frame portion. Well, this is part of our subframe, and also holds this bar for the coolers, and also holds the front suspension. As you come over on this side, you'll see how there's that same bar, the extension, and then you got the control arm that goes to it. And our wheel on the other side is a little too close to the fender. If you look over here, it's very tight. It's only about 3 fingers. I could put 6 or 7 in the other one. And we're gonna need basically this side to come forward. And upon inspecting this even closer, well, you can see how it broke that over there. It went like this. But for this to move, there also has to be a kink or a bind somewhere else on the frame. And if you look really closely, you can see, there it is. That right there is the kink. I'm coming over to the other side. It's all flat. And there's the kink. So we're just gonna go ahead. You could try to pull this out and possibly weld it. It is steel, but we're just gonna go ahead. We bought a new one from BMW. It was about $1,000. We're gonna go ahead and pull this all apart, replace the subframe, get our new bars on here, and then we're all ready for reassembly. And we even got one of these engine stand tools that we're borrowing from a friend, so we can go ahead and support the engine on top and get this thing all knocked out. And the best part about it is we will put everything together, and hopefully that'll also solve our wheel issue over there, because that does make sense where it hit that, it bent that, and you know, 1/4 inch up front could be 2-3 inches on the side over here from the suspension geometry. So stay tuned guys, we're gonna go ahead and get this all knocked out, and then we're gonna get this thing all fully assembled. I can't wait what this front end looks once it's all put back together, and we'll get everything ready for paint after we do the coolers as well. Quick update, we had to start cutting everything just to get this control arm wedged out of here. It's still in there. I haven't try to fully pry it out, but this obviously moved on its own. It was literally pushed in all the way here, so I think we're good here. But I started cutting at the subframe, and we're gonna replace that anyways. And also got behind here with the Sawzall, avoided the dust boot, and started cutting at the bar or bracket behind it that holds, basically it's the same thing as this side. And we got a hammer and a flathead screwdriver, started pounding on it, bent it out, and it naturally popped out of there itself. Now it's not all the way out, but we already got the other side all torn apart. And this one, everything got torn apart except for this. And it makes sense because the way this thing got hit, you can see how it shifted over. It also probably had this, the subframe had shifted over because the control arm is still good. Just the subframe was kinked over, which was holding this really tight. And you can see where the kink is actually right there. You can see how it chipped the paint and bent. So I'm so happy that we're actually replacing the subframe. I know a lot of guys will say just pull it out, but you're never gonna know where your alignment's at. So after all this cutting and all the Milwaukee tools out here, I think we should be able to, let's see if we can, yeah, I think we should be able to get this out. Still tight. There we go, almost. There we go. We got it all out. So now we can move on to everything else, but there you go. You can actually see behind it. Man, that was a lot of cutting and hammering, cutting, just trying to get this thing wedged out of there. Alrighty, so we actually have only 3 subframe bolts that hold the subframe on. There's one here, there's also another one up here, and then you have one right there. Same thing on this side, you got one here that goes to the frame, this one and up front, and then you got the engine mount bolts, which as you guys know, this side engine mount is really good. On this side, it is cracked. Not a big deal. Every BMW, normally when it hits a subframe, it does crack this over here. And this was a relatively cheap part. It's like $90 or $80 for the mount. And it's a 2-piece mount, so you do have the bottom side and the top side. What we're gonna do is we're gonna disconnect the mount. As you can see, there's studs sticking out. Underneath here, there is Torx bolts that hold that mount into place. And we're just gonna remove the 3 Torx bolts as well. And that way that mount could stick to the side of the motor. Once we drop the subframe, then we only have 4 bolts that hold that mount to the side, and we'll have full access to that. So as far as how hard the subframe is, I've never done it, but this was not that bad. It seems pretty easy to do. I mean, it's pretty much common setup. Remove all the control arms from it. As you guys can see, the subframe runs along here, connects to your arms, so you gotta remove those. Same thing on this side. And then some bolts and hold the motor up. So I don't know, I don't want to speak too soon, but this seems very simple. And so far, guys, we are totally into this project about 1 hour. BMW quotes this an 8.5-hour job. I called a few local shops around. Shop rate to work on this thing is about $120, $140 an hour where we're at. And it was easily over $1,000 just to do this job. I think the cheapest quote we got was $1,200. That is not including the parts. The parts were about $1,000 for the subframe and that mount. And yeah, I think so far we're into it at an hour. Probably 1 more hour to remove everything. And this is an easy job. I'd say reassembly and putting it back together no more than 4 hours. And we should be able to get this thing all done in half the time of the book time. So we got our subframe completely loosened up on the driver's side. You guys can see how it's moving and everything, and all the mounts are dislocated and everything's removed. But we have 2 more bolts, and that is on the passenger side. And the reason I have not taken those off is because this subframe is super heavy, guys. Let's go underneath there so I can show you guys why. So a subframe on a car basically supports almost everything on the middle of the some of the car, I guess the middle of the car. Supports also your engine mounts that sit over here. You can see how the mounts actually sit on the subframe. In this case, it also supports our steering rack, which in this case is an electric power steering. You can see the shaft that runs down to it and then connects into our steering shaft there. That's also supported by the subframe. For now, we've actually got the steering shaft held up with the engine stand and on a bungee cord that's right there. It holds a lot of stuff and it's very strong metal. For this to get bent like this, you know, and trying to pull this back out, I'm so glad we're actually changing this, because trying to get this exactly back to factory spec and OEM spec is very tough if you were trying to pull it. So we've got everything disconnected. And how heavy this is, I would say probably 250 pounds or so. We're gonna use a transmission jack to make our life a little bit easier, and a good friend of ours is actually on his way right now, and he's willing to give us a hand. Like I said, this is my first time actually doing a subframe job at all, and quite frankly, it's not really that difficult. If you have access to a lift, or even can get the car high enough, it's not something that's that hard. BMW, like I said, wanted an arm and a leg. Independent shops did not want to work on it because it's too new of a car, and they just, you know, around our town, a lot of people don't want to work on stuff like this because, well, it's a Mercedes and BMW. It must be complicated and difficult. We don't want to touch it. So I'm going to actually go ahead and call the dealership and see if we can figure out how much exactly a job like this would cost.
Calling 100 BMW Certified Pre-Owned South. This is Hannah speaking. How can I direct your call?
Hey, Hannah, can you get me over to the service department, please?
Of course, just one moment.
Thank you so much.
Hello, and thank you for calling Hendrick BMW of South Boulevard Service. My name is Sydney. How can I help you?
Hi, Sydney. Hey, I've got a 2022 BMW X3 M40i, and I need to replace the front subframe. I do understand it is about an 8.5 hour job, and was just trying to figure out what you guys' cost would be around and what your hourly rate is.
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. I can definitely try to get that information for you. All right, and I did pull up the phone number. Is it for...
No, it's a 2022 BMW X3 M40. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. All right, and I do see that X3 on there as well. Okay, perfect. All right, and when you said it was the full front, like the full half of the front frame that you were needing to get replaced?
Correct, yeah, the front subframe, or the, I guess you would call it the engine cradle.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Were there some current issues with that you were needing to get it replaced? Was there damage, anything like that?
Correct, yeah, it's a damage to subframe cradle.
Okay. A brief hold really quickly. You were wanting just the labor rate, or you were wanting like the overall cost for the parts and labor?
Just a labor rate.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So our labor rate, it does run about $179 plus tax per hour. Were you looking to purchase a part from us, like, or did you have another purchase that you had in mind already?
Yeah, I was gonna purchase the part from you guys. I guess if you want, if you don't mind, give me a parts and labor price so we can get a breakdown.
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. It won't let me pull up the full price quote on my end as far as like the parts and like time frame of the labor. So what I could go ahead and do is just send a message down to my service advisors, and then they would be able to pull all that information together and then be able to contact you back. Would that be okay?
Yeah, how long do you think that'll take?
It shouldn't take too long. I will say that we do close at 6. They should be able to give you a call back before we close. And I can definitely make sure to stress that in the message as well.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. And then you did say your hourly rate is roughly around $200 an hour, almost with tax, I guess, right?
Yeah, roughly about 200 hours, just at $179 plus tax. And of course, we don't use the full hour; it's prorated.
Perfect. Sounds good. Well, hey, thank you so much. If you can give me a holler back with the estimate, I would really appreciate it. Correct.
Okay, perfect. Yep. So I'll reach out to them and have them call you back directly. Okay.
Alrighty. Thank you.
All right. Yes, sir. Have a good one.
So we sent them a picture of the subframe of the BMW, and they sent us back what they quote. For the parts, they quoted us $1,400 for the subframe. We actually paid $950, and all we had to do was go ahead and call the parts department ourselves. For the labor, they quoted us $2,058. We did that ourselves, so we basically saved $2,058. The alignment, they quoted us $170. We got that done, and we can actually get that done for like $80. So we saved $90 there. For the engine mounts, we paid $200, and they quoted us almost $470. So we saved about $270 on the parts there. And labor, it actually took us, 8 hours to do the whole thing. And for the engine mount, they asked for an extra $80. It actually took 20 minutes to change, so we saved $80 there. And in total, we actually saved a whopping grand total of $2,948 by doing this ourselves. And like I said, it only took us 8 hours to do. So we basically paid ourselves $368 an hour. I don't know about you guys, but that's good money right there. That's more than doctors and lawyers. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and tackle this ourselves actually. So like I said, guys, you guys can save a lot of money during the rebuild process if you do actually a lot of stuff yourself and exclude the dealership and actually call in and get the parts and source them yourself. Look at that. We have our subframe all down on our transmission jack. Thank you so much to our good friend Justin for allowing us to borrow his transmission jack. He literally just picked this thing up off Facebook Marketplace the other day, and it was still on the back of his truck bed, and even brought it over to our shop and delivered it. And that's how good friends help one another. But guys, everything's supported. The motor didn't fall. We have the rack still hanging up on that bungee right over there. Everything underneath here looks really good. And as you guys know, there was a crack on that one side, on the passenger side, basically, of the engine mount bracket. The engine mount itself is good, but the bracket cracked. Now on the driver's side, here is our engine mount. You can see it broke the engine mount. The bolt is still in there actually, and the other top half of the mount is there. The bracket on this side looks a lot more beefier than it does on this side. So I think that bracket is fine. We got a new one of these ordered in. If anyone needs the part number, there it is. They're different, of course, from which side they're on, as they're different part numbers. There's the passenger side. In case anyone needs that, go ahead and pause the video and take that off. But this is going to be 2-3 days out. Our subframe's also 2-3 days out, and the bracket on the other side's 2-3 days out. I really kind of wish that I ordered a downpipe for this thing already, because right now it is so simple to get a downpipe in here. It still will be, and we will put a downpipe on this thing and get this thing tuned once we get this thing on the road. We still have a lot of room to it, but right now, I mean, you got a lot of room right now. So I'll catch you guys back here in 2-3 days, and we'll get the new subframe on there. But man, that only took a total of 2.5 hours to get it all out. And to put it back together, I'm not thinking any more than 2 hours now that you know where all the bolts are and you got all the tools all ready for it, all the sockets, and you're ready to roll. So if you look at the subframe, you can actually see the damaged section. I'm going to stand back a little bit, and you can see there's a massive, and I mean massive, kink there. That really is bad. Now if I go over to the other side, you can see how it's flat. Coming back over to this side, dang. And then behind it, there's also the bulge there. If I'll go back over to the other side, nothing. It is pure flat. So I'm so happy we actually replaced the subframe, and I'll catch you guys later when it comes in and show you guys the reassembly process. Dang guys, take a look at this. I just also noticed this while I was looking at it. If you look at the gap right here and the gap there, that's where the impact is also. You can see how the subframe kind of like kinked in and pulled that end down. You can see how this side's a little bit different than that side. This is why you always, guys, replace the subframe. Don't try to pull it out, because if you pull it out, yes, you could have closed the gap that's down here, you know, where the crack was and everything. But who knows if you're able to, you might have seen that, so you might have maybe pulled that out too, but I don't know how you're gonna be able to get all that back in line, and let alone know you're within factory spec. Once we are done with this car, we are going to know that everything is within factory spec, because we literally replaced every little piece that was damaged on this car. from the frame rails we put on the frame machine, everything went right in smoothly, the new rebar and everything. And now we're doing the subframe as well. So there's no shortcuts on this car, and everything's gonna be perfect within OEM specs. Couple days later goes by, take a look what came in the mail. We have our subframe delivered to us on a pallet. And guess what? We don't have the John Deere anymore pulling it. We actually upgraded with the Kubota. So if you haven't seen the John Deere video that we did on the rebuild on, go ahead and check it out. But I think overall the Kubota is a way better tractor. That's besides the point, guys, though. Our subframe is in, and also one of our right side engine mount brackets. So we're still waiting on the driver's side engine mount. What we're gonna go ahead and do is transfer all the stuff from our old subframe to the new one, and then also replace that bracket. That way when the engine mount comes in, we're ready to roll. Here is our engine mount on this side. It is cracked, but we do need to get this bolt out here. There's also another bolt for it right there. And then there's also another one up top that we've already started, if you can see it. The problem is it keeps hitting the downpipe. So I can't get a tool in there, and the downpipe right here is in the way. We'll take it off for now so we can get access to this. Now with the downpipe out of the way, look how much room we have. We can actually take this bolt out and unscrew it without it hitting the downpipe. And you can actually see inside our turbos too. Let me get in there. There is our turbo inside. Everything looks good. Car looks brand new, barely has any miles on it. And there's our headers over there going to the side of the block. Everything on this side looks good. There's no leaks whatsoever, which that's what I would expect with, almost 4,000 miles. But we're gonna go ahead and order us a brand new downpipe. So once again, that's gonna set us back a little bit. We're gonna have to wait for that to come in because I don't wanna put all this stuff together, including the subframe that goes underneath here, which is right there, because of the fact that then it's gonna be all covered up. You could still do a downpipe with the subframe on there, but why do that when it's so much easier when everything's already out of the way? So we're gonna go ahead and replace this mount, and then we're gonna go ahead and put the new downpipe in there, and then we'll put that subframe back in. Took out the old mount. Oh. There's the broken mount. That's all we have. Is that the new one right there?
That's the new one right there.
There you go. Putting in the new one. Out with the old. It goes in pretty simple. And then we're ready for the subframe right after this. Alrighty guys, so we got our subframe on here. Everything's going smoothly. We got all the bolts in. Everything mounts perfectly. Both bolts there. We got our engine mounts are gonna fall right into place once we lower the engine back down. And everything's going good. This one just needs to get tightened up, but all the bolt holes are going smooth, except for the two front frame rail bolts that mount to the front frame rail right here. So this is the driver's side front frame rail. As you know, we already took this thing to the frame rack to get this straightened out. The rebar fit in perfectly, but I still think we're about maybe 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch off, because this bolt will go in there, but it won't thread. If you shine the light in there really closely, kind of hard with the camera, but the bolt doesn't exactly get centered. And if you come over to the other side over here, you can see real closely where that mount to that subframe has to go in. And we're about 1/4 of an inch off on the passenger side frame rail. So I think we probably need to go ahead, pull it a little bit more over there. It ain't anybody's fault because of the fact that the old subframe was probably bent.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's probably the best way of doing this, don't you think?
I'd say so, because if you have those two front bolts removed, it should make it a lot easier to pull the rest of the frame the rest of the way out without tweaking the subframe that you have on there now.
Right. Well, the fact that everything else bolts up on there means that everything back there is fine.
Perfect, yeah.
So just the two front ones.
And it's just like that much off, too.
No one would have caught that.
Nah.
Not even if we had our own frame rack here. I don't think we would have caught that.
You wouldn't have noticed until you put the new one on. Then you're going to be like, oh, we got to redo it a little more.
Well, I guess we could put on all the suspension parts on there. Lower control arms and tie rods and all that fun stuff back in. Get our engine mounts in so we can drive it on the trailer there.
Yeah, it sounds like a fun time.
And we'll just leave those two nuts loose on the bottom. That way they have some sort of pulling, I guess, point to stop when it gets, near the hole, I guess. So.
And then you just put those two bolts back in and you're driving away out of there.
Ready to roll. Cool. Well, little setbacks, guys, but who knows? It's to be expected, I guess, right?
Yeah, what can you do? When you got frame damage, you got to work around it.
You got to do it. So we got the suspension actually all tied up, especially on the driver's side over here. All the suspension went right into place. Everything fit in perfectly with the new subframe. What about your side? Have you got your side done yet?
Not just yet.
Oh man, did I beat you?
I think you did.
No, you were recording my side. Coming over here on this side, that one control arm, I was always expecting this to be bent possibly right there because it went into the subframe, but it's not bent. It fit in perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So that means the subframe just had it probably kinked and squished in or something.
Yeah, it's probably just a nightmare.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of hungry. Are you hungry?
Yeah.
Let's go grab a bite real quick. And what is it, 3 o'clock already? No lunch?
Just about, yeah.
Yeah. Let's go grab a bite. We'll grab some food, and then we'll knock this thing back out, put the wheels on there, and get this thing back to the frame shop.
Back there.
Dang!
Oh yeah. Lunchtime now.
Hello, Mr. George. How much you pay the new guy?
How much money?
You still on that?
Yeah, I can't get one threaded.
Man, I made it look easy, didn't I?
Yeah.
Should have used a screwdriver trick.
It works so much better.
I don't know. I just never used the screwdriver trick. I just threw it on there, hold it up, and you ready to roll?
I've never had success that way, honestly.
You ready to go work at Discount Tires?
No, I quit.
All right, guys, so we got the wheels mounted onto the hub assembly and everything. Subframe's all in there. Everything's good to go except for those 2 bolts that still need to go through the frame rack. So we can get that frame rail just shifted over probably about a 1/4 inch, you'd say.
Just about, yeah.
A little bit of a nudge over. Bolts will go right in. And we're actually going to leave these coolers off and the brackets off right here. And the reason being is because this opens up the whole spot for them so they can actually see exactly where this needs to be at. And our wheels just mounted perfectly, of course, but the suspension and everything else mounted up perfectly like nothing was bent. So the only thing we have that's bent is just that subframe right there. Well, the frame rails just need to be a little bit more this way. So we're good to go on that. But the biggest thing on this car, the reason we also replaced the subframe, was the passenger side on this car. The wheel was like 2 fingers against the fender. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. When you come over here, you got 4 fingers that go in here in the gap, right? Now our gap over there was only 2 fingers, so that means this side was shifted, and in fact, that's why there was a kink on the subframe. On this side, we also have 4 fingers. There you go.
Would you say that's a professional measurement?
That's how they do it at BMW.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. That seems like a pretty certified way of measuring, really.
Yeah, because your fingers never grow within a couple seconds.
Yeah, but I mean, it depends. You know, you might travel and it might go a little further, but you know, for the most part, you should be good.
Yeah, you just keep going in, and you know, I think we're good. Honestly, I think that's good. We can get a tape measure too, but alignment will tell everything.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, but this is how they do it at the factory, guys. I guarantee it. Alrighty guys, so we got the Beamer on the trailer. It is all ready to go. We're gonna actually go ahead and take this thing over back to the body shop now that they actually have a place and a visual way of actually seeing how that subframe is gonna go in there. They're gonna know exactly where we're gonna get that final pull in, and then everything is square and we're ready for reassembly. We literally started the car up, started right up. All our ground straps are good. No power steering rack errors, none of that stuff. So everything is solid on this thing. It's ready for reassembly. I didn't even hear a clunk without those 2 front bolts. So I think we might be good. What do you think?
I'd say we're pretty good. I didn't even see it move when you hopped up on the trailer or anything.
What if we just leave it like that?
No one would ever know.
No, we're gonna go ahead and pull it out, put those 2 bolts back in, and then we're ready for reassembly time and almost paint. So with that being said, guys, that's all the time we have left in this video. We're gonna end it right here over here. On the next video, you guys will see what happens once it's back from the frame rack, and hopefully starting taking apart the coolers and reassembling everything and get this thing one step closer to hit the road and doing some ripping. But if you guys like what you guys saw, smash that thumbs up button, subscribe, guys, and as always, if you have something to say, drop it down in the comments, and until then, we'll see you on the next one. Peace.